What up everyone? We got an awesome process to show you today, and you're probably wondering what all this stuff scattered all over the kitchen is for. Well, you're gonna have to watch a little bit longer to find out, but I will tell you that we get asked this question all the time, and we're gonna address it next. Never coat a countertop before checking this. As you can see, we have a slight taper on our edge. We're gonna show you how to address that. Or let's say you guys have a tapered edge towards the back or towards the front. We're gonna show you the best way to address these issues with a Leggari flood coat.
So I'll bring you guys up to speed and kind of go over all the steps that we did. The first thing you want to do when you start this is tape off your backsplash or your wall, and that's what the blue tape around here is. So we did that. The next thing I want to talk about is your boards. This board didn't get red tape all the way to the bottom, and you saw since we caulked the bottom edge, the epoxy might soak into the wood and stick. And so always make sure wherever epoxy might get on your counter that there's tape there so it doesn't stick to the wood, and when you pull off chunks of wood on your edges. For the tape, guys, we're just using polystucco tape. It's almost just like a plastic. Works great, it's shiny, no epoxy will stick to it, it'll pop right off. Next thing is brad nails. Obviously you can brad nail into wood. Maybe you have a tile edge, a tile counter that you need to flood coat and get level. What we recommend is bondoing the grout lines, getting it flush and smooth, and then you would put the wood up like this and you would clamp it. You want to grab a clamp and we'll show them. Perfect example right here. You can get these big clamps, and we would usually use these out here on the sides, maybe 2 or 3. One there, one in the middle. That'll hold those on. And then you can also tack your edges right into the wood that's clamped to your edge. So we can tack right here to hold that on. If you don't have a spot to clamp, like for instance right here, we would put a piece of wood from here to there, right? Clamp it here. We can tack in from the back side here, right? So there's always a way to get the wood put on if you're not able to brad nail into your edge counter, for example, if it was tile. We used to put these on and then we would put caulk around the bead of the counter, but when we put them on, it would push the caulking up. So what we decided was, let's just pop these on and then put our caulking at the very bottom to keep it from dripping. That way we're not digging a bunch of caulking out of the face. So there will be a couple spots we'll have to Bondo and fill in, but this makes it very, very fast. So before we finish the island, guys, I want to talk about the product we're going to use to flood coat this, and it's off our single items list on our website. We don't just sell countertop kits and floor kits, we also sell them in bulk items, single items. We're going to be using a 3-gallon kit, so if you guys run into this issue on your project, that's where you'd go, leggari.com, click store, and then you can find all the single items there. For example, a 3-gallon kit. Yeah, we'll finish out this island. A cool little tip for you is you can always practice designs and colors because you're coating over this anyway. So if you want to pigment it, mess around with new techniques, this is a perfect opportunity to do that when we fill this in with the epoxy.
So we're ready to pour out our flood coat. The only thing that we're really looking for is just a nice even bead everywhere. So I'm gonna start pouring this out. Now I don't wanna pour too much on the island and run out of resin for everywhere else. So I'm gonna start kind of light and we'll just pour a bead down the middle. And then we're just gonna try to get that bead nice and even. And we'll jump over here. And then with the rest of the resin, we're just gonna get an even bead all the way across our countertops. And then we're just gonna take a 6-inch 3/8 nap roller and we're just gonna start moving this resin from side to side, getting it as level as we possibly can. So now that we have all our resin leveled out, the last thing we want to do before we walk away from it is just mist the entire surface with denatured alcohol to pop any surface bubbles and help release any trapped air caught in the resin. And that's it. We're gonna let this set up overnight and we'll be back tomorrow with the next step. So we're back, it's the next day. As you saw, we just got all the boards pulled off. We did the boards two different ways. We wanted to show you the correct way to do it and not the correct way to do it. So back here on this counter, we only taped half the board. And as you saw, when we pulled those off, a lot of that board stayed adhered to the epoxy, which we don't want that. It's just extra sanding we gotta do and an extra step to get that off. Now over here on the island, we taped the entire board with the stucco tape. And as you see on that front edge, that board pulled off very cleanly and left a nice square edge for us to work with. And one more thing, we got to make sure that this tape is down really, really well, or else we run the chance of it delaminating and creating voids like this right here that we just got to come back and fill. So just to prevent any extra work, make sure that your boards are completely taped 100% and that your tape is down really well. And be very careful with these edges, guys. These edges, when you pull the boards off before they're sanded, are very, very sharp. So the next step is we're just gonna be filling any voids, sanding these edges flush, and getting them ready for another coat. So we have a majority of the sanding done and the Bondo, but we're gonna show you how to fix a few imperfections in your faces with the Bondo. So as you can see here, we have a chip that's out from the tape delaminating and pushing into the resin, which created that void right there. So we're gonna fill that with Bondo. And when you guys are working with Bondo, you guys wanna mix it up in really small batches. It tends to flash off and become unusable very quickly. And it also has a very harsh smell to it. So you wanna make sure that you're in a well-ventilated area. All right, now that we have the Bondo mixed up, I'm just gonna grab a little bit on my putty knife and I'm gonna push it into that void. And then we just flatten it off. And it's always good to leave it a little high because we're gonna come back and sand that flush. And then we'll come over here, and as you can see, we have a few nail holes that we want to fill those too. You'll just push some of the Bondo into those nail holes and scrape it off flush. And then the last thing, we're going to square up this corner as well. And there you go. We'll come back after that dries and we'll sand that down. All right guys, so this corner, we've already got the Bondo on it, it's already dry. So I'm just gonna show you how we sand that. And we're gonna be using a battery powered orbital sander hooked up to a vacuum to cut down on the dust. Alrighty, it's that easy, guys. You just throw the Bondo up, sander flush, and we have a nice, clean, square edge to accept a new coat of epoxy.
The project's finished. Kyle and Trey crushed this. This countertop looks like it was a casted countertop. Edges are beautiful. It's perfectly level now. Comment below if you guys thought this was a cool process, if you maybe learned something from it. We're always interested in your feedback. So that being said, I'm gonna go over some key factors of this project in case you guys are doing it and some things that you wanna look out for. So the first thing I'm gonna show you is the level, right? So remember this whole edge we showed you in the beginning kind of tapered off. So if I put this level here, right, there's no gap here. So it's all nice and flush now. And then we'll jump from there, we'll go over here, we put the level over here. Remember these are really tapered, so now they're perfectly flush. And I will point out, you can see where the original counter stopped and how thick of that clear resin it took to level these out. Again, if you have an unlevel countertop, you're gonna see that same stuff. Some spots will fill up thicker than that, some may not be that thick. And so we'll jump over to here, we'll kind of go over some of the Bondoing stuff. So all the nail holes were filled. When you sand those, any imperfections that you have to fill and sand, you wanna run your hand across it, make sure there's no ridges, right? You might not be able to see it, but you'll be able to feel it with your hand if you have a ridge or if it needs sanded more. So it's always good when you're finished, run your hands across it. The faces are the most important part because the resin doesn't go on as thick on the face as the top once you coat it. The other thing is our corners, right? Because we had the square corners and then we caulked underneath that. And so we didn't get a flush square edge. So we had to fill some of these corners and that's all the Bondo. And then it's sanded down. Next thing I'm going to talk about is your corners. If you notice, how nice these corners are. They got a slight round to them. You never want to coat over square corners. You always want to have some type of rounded edge to them. It's always good to round your bottom corners as well. That allows the resin to flow off nice and easy and then drip, and you don't get a buildup on your bottom edge. A lot of people ask about that. Another thing I'm going to point out is you'll notice some spots there's blue showing through. This is from our ocean countertop. We showed you a simple way to do a wave technique. So if you guys want to see that, we'll link that in the video. Very, very cool process, but that's what the blue spots are. One last thing, guys, actually two last things. One is your outside corners. You always want to round those by hand, right? You never want these square either. So you can notice these are kind of rounded a little bit. Never coat over anything that's square. And then the last thing is you're going to want to scuff up the whole countertop because you're just going to get a better bond, and you're probably not going to be doing all this prep work the next day unless you're hustling. If you do, you don't have to sand the top of the surface, but if it's past 24 hours, you want to sand it, scuff it up. And you can do 100 grit, 80 grit. You can go as heavy as you want on the top because we're not worried about scratches and stuff like that. We just want to get a good bond. We out.